What is your full name?
Marcia Ellen Reeves.
What is your date of birth?
November 16th, 1944.
And what is your relation to me?
I'm your grandmother on your father's side.
Okay. And where did you grow up?
I grew up in a little country town called Ewing, Kentucky.
Okay. What was your childhood like?
I had a really good childhood. I was born and raised on a farm. My dad didn't own the farm, but he rented the farm. And my mother, she worked out in the fields right along with my dad. And I remember I was an only child for many years until I was 18. And we didn't have a lot of money, but mom and dad always had food on the table because we always raised a big garden, and daddy would always raise a couple of hogs, for the meat. And my mom and dad was really good people. My dad always helped his neighbors with any kind of farm work that they needed done, and my mom was always a big worker in the church and school. Excuse me. She was always in the PTA, and I remember a lot of times, especially on birthdays, back in those days, you were allowed to bring your child cupcakes or cookies to school, and we'd always have a little party, and I always liked that. I always enjoyed that. So we got along really great. My mom and dad hardly ever spanked me. I was a good kid. But I
Sure.
always wanted a little brother or sister, but that didn't happen until later in life. When I was 18, my mom got pregnant,
Oh,
and
dang.
so I had a little brother then. But the years growing up on the farm was very special to me. And then later years, like in the 60s, my dad took a job taking care of the Elizaville Cemetery. And he prepared the graves, mowed the grass, and trimmed around the monuments and the whole 9 yards. And my mother, again, she always helped him with any kind of work my dad did. My mom was right there at his side helping him. And then she would come in and fix a big meal for everybody to eat. And she was, it was a very good relationship.
Sounds sounds like it. Um, do you remember any stories that your parents or your grandparents used to tell you when you were little or anything?
About them or about me?
Um, just like anything, or do they tell you like stories or like sayings or maybe?
Well, I know my mom and my dad, of course, was born in a different era than I was, and I know a lot of times they would tell me stories about their growing up years and how hard they had it, because my mother came from a family of five brothers and sisters. I mean, she herself was number five, but my dad came from a family of 12, and they really had it hard. But again, they both were um, raised on the farm, and I know my dad, a lot of times he would tell me some of the stories about the mischievous things that him and his brother would get into, and that kind of thing. And of course, my mom, she was the rebel of her family. She was the first one to wear fingernail polish. She was the first one to wear lipstick. And my granddaddy, he was very strict with stuff like that. And he really didn't want his girls to do that. He only had one son and the rest girls. But my mom, she liked the lipstick and she liked fingernail polish, so she was the little rebel. But I've heard a lot of stories from her about how many times that she would get in trouble because she'd try to go to school and have a little bit of fingernail polish on or lipstick. She'd wait until she got down to where the bus come along, and then she'd put a little bit of lipstick on. And of course, those were the olden days, so to speak. That was like back in the early 30s, late 20s. So that was the kind of stories that I got from them. It was mostly about when they were growing up and what kind of mischief they got into.
You said that you never got in trouble, but did you? What was like the worst thing that you ever got in trouble for, if you did?
The worst thing, the thing that comes to mind, my aunt had 4 girls and a boy, and every Sunday, usually my aunts and all my uncles and cousins, we'd all get together, and we would go over to my grandpa's house for Sunday dinner. And one day, it was a real pretty day, and we were outside, and I had just gotten this water gun. I was kind of a little tomboy growing up, so I had a BB gun, and I had a water gun, and some things that little girls usually didn't have, but since I was an only child for so long, I got to be kind of a little tomboy. So anyway, I got this water gun, and I was squirting the other little girls. And of course their mom had fixed their hair all real cute and everything, and when the water hit their curls went flat. And on top of that, I got in trouble because I wasn't supposed to squirt anybody with this water, especially the girls. So I very seldom ever got a spanking. Like I said, my mom and dad were very loving parents. But I knew when my mother went out in the yard and she cut a switch that I was going to get in trouble. And so she switched me a little bit, not much, but just enough to hurt my feelings. And she made me go in and sit down in the living room in front of everybody. And that was really embarrassing because here I had been mischievous, plus I had got a spanking. And I had to sit in front of everybody and have them know that I had gotten a spanking. And that was really embarrassing to me.
What was your best memory as a child? Like something you either got that you really wanted, or just a place you went, or...
Well, like I said, growing up, we were poor, but my mom and dad always found some way to get what we needed. And there was a couple different times that I remember specifically. The youngest time, I guess, was when I was 12, and it was at Christmas time. And of course, I knew by that time that there wasn't a Santa Claus, but my mom had asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I said, well, I would like to have one last doll, because I had always gotten some kind of little doll for Christmas every year. And she said, well, don't you think you're just a little bit too old for dolls now? And I said, well, I just want one more doll. And back in those days, the walking doll, it wasn't a mechanical doll. It had stiff legs that you actually walked the doll across the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if I could just have just one more doll, then I'd be happy. So she first said she didn't think she was going to let me have it. But anyway, Christmas morning, when I came downstairs, of course, that was the only time that we ever got fruit, too, because oranges and things like that weren't grown locally, they were a little more expensive. So you didn't get them only like at Christmas time. But when I came down and I saw that long, skinny box, that I just knew that doll was going to be in there. I ran over, and of course Mom would always make sure everything was wrapped, under the tree. And that was the first thing I opened, and it was the most beautiful doll, because I knew that it was the last doll I was going to get. And my mom had told me that she didn't know if she was going to get me one or not because I was a little bit too old for a doll.
How old were you then?
I was 12, and I still have that doll. Mom had wrapped it up and put it in a hope chest, and when she passed away a couple years ago, we were going through the stuff, and we found this doll. So I give it a better hairdo over the years. The hair had kind of got matted and everything, so I got it a new outfit, and I've got the doll now in my bedroom. And every time I look at that doll, I remember how much that meant to me when I got that doll.
I think I remember seeing it in there, maybe.
Yeah, I think you did, because it's in the spare bedroom.
Oh, then yeah, I probably did.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a nickname at all growing up, or how did you get it?
Yes, I did. Believe it or not, they used to call me when I was in the 8th grade. Back in the day when I was going to school, the 1st grade through the 8th grade was all in one building. So the 7th and 8th grade was in the same room. And believe it or not, I was tall and thin, really tall. And they used to call me String Bean when I was in school. And I hated that because it wasn't a very cute name. And I was skinny as I could be, long-legged and skinny. And it was forever before I ever gained any weight at all. So that was the worst nickname that I ever got.
String Bean.
Yeah.
That's cute. What was your first paying job? Like, actual job that you had?
My first paying job.
Like when you were like a teenager, or were you into adulthood?
Well, actually, the town that my dad took care of the cemetery, Elizaville, had a little general store. And I worked for the owner of that store for a couple of years. And back in those days, I mean, there was a lot of little stores around through the country. There wasn't no such thing as a big shopping center or anything like that. So I worked there for him, and I made $40 a week working for him. And I worked every day. I went in at 9 o'clock in the morning and left at 5 that afternoon. And I did everything. I cleaned the windows if they needed cleaning. Of course, they had the big windows, in the store. And I put up stock, and just in general, whatever needed done. And I thought I was doing great, making $40.
That's more than I make, so.
That was back in the 60s, so.
Yeah, you were doing pretty good. I make about $6 a week, if that.
Well,
so.
But, that doesn't mean something's not going to come along, later. You just have to be patient.
Yeah, I hope so. When did you, how did you meet, Papa?
Well, like I said before, that's a story in itself.
Whole story. How did you meet him?
Well, excuse me. Actually, he was going with my best friend. And I was going with his cousin. I told you it was a little involved. Well, I didn't really like his cousin that well, but I wasn't dating much then, and he was a nice boy, and I did it more or less to have somebody to go out with and stuff and do things with. So anyway, we, my mom and my dad and I and a group of people that we knew always used to go to square dances on Saturday night. And of course, they had slow dancing and fast dancing, but the main thing for the night was square dancing. And everybody looked forward to it because it was like on Saturday night. Everybody had worked hard through the week, and they wanted to do something recreational, and that was the best thing to do then. So anyway, we went to this particular night. We went to the square dance. Well, at that time, I wasn't going with anybody, and neither was she. So Edward and I think the boy's name was Roy, was his cousin, was Edward's cousin. They had come to the dance to, meet girls or dance or whatever. So she took a shine to Edward right away. She just flipped over him. Well, she was quite a bit older than I was. She was probably, I don't know, maybe 10 years older than me. But anyway, when we met, she was dancing with Edward, and I was kind of pushed into the other boy's arms, so to speak. And so it just kind of transpired into a relationship. I was going with Roy. She was going with Edward. So, and we'd always double date. And Edward would always be the one to drive because he had the car, so to speak.
Was he close to your age or hers?
Well, Papaw was 3 years younger than me.
So she was way older than him.
But she was a lot older than him. But anyway, this one particular time, after we double dated a few times, and I know this sounds strange, but it's like you hear of people saying there's a chemistry, that you really like somebody and you can't explain it, but there's a chemistry when you're with this person. And that's kind of the way it was with me and him. But we didn't want to hurt the other people's feelings because we'd already kind of been thrown in with somebody else. So anyway, this one time we'd been someplace on a double date or something. So Roy was staying with a relative then, and so Edward, we had already dropped off my friend at her house, and so that just left Edward and me and Roy. And so we had to pass Roy's house before we got to mine. So Edward said, "Why don't you just let me drop you off, and then I'll run her on home and then go on home." Well, he was kind of reluctant to do that, but anyway, he did. And so that was the first time that Edward and I had ever really been alone to talk or anything. So anyway, we were approaching my house, and he pretended like he was just going to put on the gas and go past my house. And so I said, "Well, just go ahead, go past my house. I don't care." Kind of like that. Well, he did. So we took a drive, and we went on down the road, and we just started talking, to each other and kind of enjoying each other's company. So he proceeded to go to the end of this road. There was a bridge that usually went over a creek. Well, the bridge happened to be out. We didn't know that, so we had to backtrack, of course. But anyway, when we saw that the bridge was out, he had to back up to the driveway that was the closest there so he could turn around. And when he turned to back up, our eyes met and our lips met, and we had our first kiss.
Oh my gosh.
And that just sealed it right then.
Was it planned, or did it just happen by accident?
It was completely by accident, and it was the most romantic moment, I think, because it was like we just fell in love right then. So then we had the the chore of trying to tell these other two people, how we felt about each other. So um, I think he told his cousin that he had feelings for me before I got to tell my friend. But anyway, after that happened, Edward and I had a date, and I didn't really want to because I felt like that I was betraying my friend, but yet I really wanted to be with him. So we decided to go to a drive-in theater, which was there close.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, every time you go someplace, somebody sees you that knows you, and it was actually her niece that was there at the drive-in, and she had seen us together. So of course she couldn't wait to go home and tell my friend that we were together. So of course she called me on the phone and ratted me out, and was fussing at me, and I really felt bad. I had mixed feelings. I wanted to be with Edward. I felt bad because the situation was like it was, and I knew she had feelings for him, but I didn't think. I know she didn't love him, but she really had feelings for him. But anyway, she got in a good mood with me, and Edward and I continued to see each other. And after a year, he gave me an engagement ring, and then I really wasn't sure if I wanted to get married right away, so we were engaged for another year. So actually, we went together for 2 years before we got married.
How old were you when you got married?
He was 19 and I was 22.
You guys were young.
Yeah.
Especially him.
Yeah, but
getting married at 19, dang.
But when he was so mature for his age, he had had a hard life, and he started working in the fields, making his own money and everything when he was 12.
Oh my gosh.
And in fact, the car that he was driving when we first met, he had saved up his tobacco money and had bought this car for $250. And it wasn't the best car in the world. It was functionable. That was about it. But I didn't care. I felt like a queen when I was in there.
Oh. When did you find out that you were going to have kids? How did you feel like in that moment?
Well,
or how long were you together before you found out?
Well, I was married once before, to your dad's dad, and that didn't work out very well. He was abusive, and so I got out of that marriage as fast as I could. I'd been with him for 2 years, and your dad was born the first year we were together, and I was thrilled with knowing that I had your dad. He was the sweetest little boy and had the best personality, very easygoing. He was always smiling. Never hardly ever had to have a spanking. I mean, he was just a really good little boy. And so then, as time went on, and I got divorced, and I came back home to stay with my mom and dad, along with Harold, your dad, and then that's when I met Edward. And Edward always treated him just like his own son, which made me love Edward even more. And he was about 6, I think, when we got married, 6 or 7, 6, I believe. And so then I got pregnant with Tony, which is Edward's son. And they've always been really close, because Harold was still young enough that they could be brothers, growing up. So I was always happy with my two children, even though I really wanted to have a little girl. I didn't want to keep trying and have 99 boys and never have any girls.
Yeah, that.
So
plus boys are trouble. You don't want a bunch of them.
So we just decided that it was best to stop at one. So that made us have two boys to raise, and so that's what we did.
Who was the most mischievous growing up, my dad or Tony?
Of course, Tony. Your dad kept that personality all of his life. I mean, everybody has a temper, but it took a lot for him to ever get aggravated. Now, Tony, on the other hand, he was fire and brimstone. I mean, if something didn't go to suit, he flew off the handle right away. You know, that was just the difference in their personalities. You know.
I was talking to my dad the other day, and he told me that one time you guys were living in an apartment or something, and you were there with your two friends, and you were watching someone sing on TV, but you were all drunk, and he was like, he could still see you guys from his bedroom, and he said that you, like, stood up on the couch and dumped popcorn on your head, and you were like,
I don't remember that.
And then your friend was like, well, I can do better than that, and then she, like, dumped, like, chips on her head or something, and you were both, like, singing and everything. He said he was just watching, he was like, oh my God, what's happening?
Well, I know the time he's talking about, but I don't remember doing that. But Edward's sister was always really close to me, and her name was Margie, and we were the same age. She never was married until just in the last few years, but he was on night shift that night, and she'd been living in Norwood with her. So she had went down and got this bottle of Wild Irish Rose wine. Well, we decided we was going to pop popcorn and have kind of like a little girl party. Because we weren't harming anybody. We had the TV on, and the kids were good. They was already fed and in bed and everything. So we lived in an attic apartment then. So we were up above everybody, so we didn't have to worry about disturbing anybody. So I don't remember putting the popcorn over my head, but evidently he does. But then that was kind of a party night, and she spent the night, like I said. Well, the next morning, I had a heck of a hangover. I was sick to my stomach. I felt really bad because I wasn't used to drinking, and neither was she. And the stuff that you get at the corner store isn't the best quality anyway. But she sneaked out before everybody woke up because Edward had come in at 12 o'clock because he was on like second shift. So he got home at 12. And of course we all were in bed asleep when he came in. But she sneaked out before he woke up the next morning because she figured that he would be mad at us, because we'd had a little girl party. So, of course, back in those days, I had to take my clothes to the laundromat, and I had to go to the grocery the same day, and I felt so bad. But I had to take the kids with me because Edward was kind of ticked off at me, and he said he wasn't. I was just going to have to take him with me, and he was trying to discipline me, I think, because I had been, bad or whatever you want to call it. So I had to go to the laundromat and do my laundry, and then I had to go to the grocery, and oh my gosh, that was the longest day I ever had. But we laugh about that now, Margie and I do. We laugh about that, about what a good time we had that night and drinking that Wild Irish Rose wine. No.
I still laugh. The way Dad told it, I was just like, oh my God, Grandma was just... Do you remember when your last child moved out? Like, were you happy or just kind of like, good, go? Or were you kind of like not so much?
No, I cried. Because Harold got married I think he was about 19 when he got married, and he was in the service with Allison, and I knew that that things would work out and everything. Even though he just had the maturity that I thought could handle the situation. And then Tony, when he got married, he was also 19, and he was going to go to Germany. And I just didn't feel like that Tony had the maturity to be in the service or whatever. And I didn't really want him. I figured that if he went in the service, it would mature him up by going through all of the routine and everything they go through. So I really didn't want him to get married because I felt like that he would have enough on his plate just to get through basic training and be in the service. But he wanted to get married. There wasn't nothing to do for him to get married. So I really hated to see him leave because of I just didn't think that he knew what he was doing, really. But it all worked out. I mean, it was ups and downs and a lot of long-distance phone calls from Germany. Oh, my gosh. I dreaded to even see my monthly telephone bill because his wife then was Sherry. Her name was Sherry, too. And she'd never been away from home, ever, and neither had he. So they would call quite a bit. And it wasn't anything for me to get a $200 or $300 phone bill.
Oh my Lord!
Just from that. So, but that's always a mother's instinct, I think, to not really want their kid to leave home unless it's to go to college or to better themselves somehow.
Yeah. Okay. Who was your biggest influence? And what lessons did they teach you? Any time in your life?
I would have to say definitely my mom and dad. More so, I think my mom, because I had her a little bit longer, and girls are usually closer to their mom, but I was close to my dad too. But they were such good people, and they tried to instill in me to be a good person, to try to, treat people like I would want to be treated, and to love family. They were big on family, and so am I. I like to keep traditions going, just like when you girls come over and make Christmas cookies, or you help me decorate the tree every Friday after Thanksgiving, and just things that are done yearly. So you can always, look back and say, oh, I remember when, I used to go with Grandma's, we used to do this or that. They were like that too. They tried to make traditions, and I think they influenced me that way to try to be a really good family person.
What is your earliest memory? If you can.
My earliest memory.
What is the earliest memory?
Well,
you
this
can think of?
is another one of those comedy acts, so to speak. But again, it was on the farm, and this is kind of sort of a flashback memory. But I mean, I don't know really details, and that's usually how it happens when the first memory that you have is not a whole story. It's just kind of flashes.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, my mom and dad lived on this farm where they had to milk cows, and didn't have that many, but they all had to be hand milked. They didn't have the big fancy milking machines and stuff like that. This was a long time ago. This was like probably maybe late 40s, because I was born in 1944, and I was only probably about 3 or 4 when this happened. So I remember my mom and dad was out in the barn and they was milking the cows. Well, I had gotten in the medicine cabinet, and candy was something I didn't get very often, because I said, like I said, we were poor. But this particular little pill, it was actually a laxative.
Oh, no.
But it was about the size of a baby aspirin, and it was pink, and it was sweet, and it was, I can't remember the name of it now, but it was in the medicine cabinet, and my mom, once in a great while, if I needed it, she would give it to me. And I knew that it was sweet like candy, and I really liked it. Well, I climbed up on this stool, and I got this bottle of laxatives. And I had this little dog. He was a cute little dog. He was a little feist, brown and black and white. And he followed me everywhere. Everything I ate, he ate. Everything I drank, he drank. So, when I got this bottle of pills, I went on out in the yard, and I was eating one, and I'd give him one. And then I would eat one, and I'd give him one.
Good thing it was only laxatives. It wasn't like serious pills.
Well, it was one of those times when my mother actually freaked out, because when I made my way onto the barn where they were, which the barn wasn't much further than from here out to your little building out there, so it really wasn't that far away. And she saw me with this bottle in my hand, and she told my dad, she said, "Oh my God, she has eaten those pills." Well, she grabbed me and put her finger down my throat to get me to throw up, so that I could get them off of my stomach right away. And my dad didn't know what he didn't know what was going on, why she was doing that, and he was saying, "What are you doing? Why are you doing that?" He was all upset because she was trying to get me to throw up. Well, anyway, she did get me to throw up, and I got rid of the candy pills that I had eaten. But that little dog, he had a terrible time. He pooped for 2 weeks. But he was still a good little dog. I mean, he would still follow me no matter where I went, and it didn't make any difference what I had to eat or drink. He was right there. He was the best little dog.
How old do you think you were?
I was probably, I'd say maybe 3 and a half or 4, maybe. But usually, I'd always be out there around my mom and dad, but just happened to be that because they trusted, they figured I'd be okay, but evidently, I surprised them, and that was the time that I'll never forget. I mean, that was the first memory that I have in my mind of when I was little, and I'm thinking I was probably around 3 or 3 and a half or something like that.
That's funny. What are some embarrassing stories that you have from, I don't know, any time in your life, just something like really embarrassing that happened out in public or with someone or anything?
Embarrassing? Well, I guess the first thing that I can remember when you said embarrassing, I really didn't. When Edward and I got married, mm-hmm. I didn't really know how to cook that much. I mean, I gradually learned over the years by trial and error a lot of things. Well, the first Thanksgiving, I was decided that I was going to make a turkey, cook a turkey. I never cooked a turkey before. I didn't know what you were supposed to do to it or not or whatever. But I got this small turkey, and we were going to have his mom and his stepdad over. His mom and dad were divorced years ago when he was in grade school, so his mom and stepdad was going to come over, and we was, of course, Margie was still living with them at the time, so she was going to come over too. Well, I had all this planned out and everything, and I even kind of asked his mom about how to prepare the turkey. She said, just put a lot of melted butter over it, salt and pepper, and a little bit of sage, and she said, just wrap it up in Reynolds wrap, and it'll be fine. Just put it in the oven and just let it cook, and she said, it'll be fine. She told me about how long to cook it and stuff. Well, it did. It turned out really pretty. She told me to take the foil off and let it brown on top, before I put it on the table. Well, it just looked beautiful. I was so proud of it. So we were getting ready to eat, and at the time, I had all the tables set really pretty, and, I had all the vegetables on the table and the bread and everything. And so Edward was going to cut the turkey. Well, he started to cut the turkey, and come to find out, I hadn't took the bag with all of the liver and the other stuff that they put. I had cooked that inside the turkey, and the bag, it was still intact. I mean, the bag was real heavy duty, but that was so embarrassing because he pulled this out and he said, "Aren't you supposed to take this out of the bag?" And I was just so embarrassed. I didn't know what to do. And his mom, she was always the sweetest thing. I loved her so much. She says, "Well, that's all right. It's cooked. We'll just eat it." She said, "Just open up that bag and dump it on the plate there." She said, "We'll eat it." And it was cooked, but it was very embarrassing because I'd left the bag of the little giblets in there.
Are you supposed to eat that?
Yeah, most people use it to either put in their gravy or maybe their dressing or something like that. But you're supposed to take it out and put it in a saucepan and cook it by itself. But that time I cooked it inside the turkey. So.
What lessons have you learned, trial and error or anything that you've learned in life that was really useful for later on or anything?
Well, I think lessons are, it's like the old saying, you learn something every day. I can't really put my finger on any specific thing. I think just for the amount of years that I've been living, you learn from people and learn from, like I said before, my mom and dad were people in my lives that structured me, and hopefully I've helped structure my boys and my grandchildren. It's kind of trickled down, but I can't really say there's any specific thing other than just try to be a good person. And that's what my mom and dad was. They were really good people. And if you try to be a good person, it'll get you through life.
It's beautiful. What, do you have anything that you've regretted doing or saying to someone or anything? Biggest regret.
My biggest regret. Well, there's always times that you've either said something mean to somebody that or maybe snapped at somebody because you weren't feeling good or you was tired or whatever the case might be that you've regretted. You know, I'm sure that's happened to me more than once. I guess I just I can't think of anything right away that because there's more than one thing that if I think about it, there's more than one thing that I regret. I've said things that I regretted, or I've done things that I've regretted, but it's not really one big thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think everybody has had that in their life more than once.
Let's think of a question off the top of my head. What's the craziest thing you've ever done? Like I don't know, like things you've done with your friends, like broke into a building. I don't know. What's the craziest thing you've done?
Well, I'll have to say I've never stolen anything, or I've never really done any kind of vandalism or anything like that. Did you say what kind of crazy thing I've done?
Yeah, anything. You tried some drug or something that was crazy, or LSDs?
No, I've had too much to drink sometimes. In the early years when Edward and I were young, and there was like 2 or 3 couples that we'd hang out with, and we were all about the same age, and we'd go maybe to not bad bars, just regular bars, where maybe they would have back in those days they used to have live music. Now they would have a disc jockey or a DJ or something like that. But back in the day when we used to go to dances and stuff at the bar or a New Year's party or something like that, they'd actually have live music. So I guess the only things I could say sometimes that I would regret would be maybe to have a little bit too much to drink or something like that, because I have gotten to the point to be sick, and that's terrible if you're sick after you've had too much to drink. But that wasn't. I tried not to get to that point because I knew what was coming, so I tried not to get to that point. But I guess that's really the only thing I can say I regret. But I haven't been that way for many years now, so.
What's a favorite memory of me you have from when I was little?
Oh dear. Well, to start with, it was the most precious time right after you were born, because Edward and I only had the 2 boys, had your dad and then your Uncle Tony. So I'd never had any daughters in my life, and I was just so happy when we knew that you were in this world and that you were our granddaughter, and we were going to get to spoil you really bad, because even Edward, when I was pregnant with Tony, he kind of hoped that it would be a little girl, because he always loved little girls, and especially when your mom would fix your hair and the 2 little piggy tails in the back. He thought that was so adorable. And of course, he wasn't disappointed, because Tony was completely good. Everything was healthy, and that was great. But when you came along and you were the first granddaughter, it was just a really special time for us, because we knew that we finally had this girl that we could spoil and just kind of have it as kind of a second chance for us to have like a daughter, which we didn't never have. And then, of Of course, Courtney came along. That was double the girls. That it was great. But I think the first time that I held you in my arms after you were born, that was the most special time, because I knew I finally had my little girl that I could spoil.
Oh. If this was our very last conversation, what words of wisdom would you have to pass on to me?
Well, I guess I would have to revert back to what my mom and dad always told me, is to be a good person. Try to reach your goals in life. I know you really like animals, and you want to do something with animals, and whether your dad and your mom are going to be able to send you to college, I want you to strive your best to do what you want to do in life. And you can get grants, or you can get student loans, or keep your grades up and have that as your goal, to do something that you really want to do. And you've got to get a good education in order to do what you want to do with your animals. So just have that as your focus and your goal, and don't let anything deter you of doing that, because you have to have a dream and you have to have a goal in life to make it worthwhile. If you don't, then you're just floating around and don't mean nothing. So,
Sure. What did you want to be when you were growing up?
Well, I had a fleeting thought that I wanted to be a hairdresser. And I really liked fooling with hair, and believe it or not, a lot of my girlfriends would have me to roll it. Of course, back in those days, we rolled our hair and we teased it and all that kind of stuff. The blow drying and all that didn't come in until later. But I always thought that's what I would really like to do, would be to be a hairdresser. But I never really pursued it, because, for one thing, I wound up getting married to your dad's father, and I was married really young, and that kind of blew it for me. But then I got interested in doing nails, and I love doing nails. But for what I'm doing right now in my job and in the office, I'm an office assistant / secretary, and I'm happy doing that. So.
Okay. Well, I'll close this interview with tell me an old country saying.
An old country saying?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I know a lot of them.
Which one's the most out there?
Don't count your chickens before they're hatched.
That's right, folks.